We've got the BBC absolutely able to do what it pleases on a multi-billion-pound budget. Vanessa, welcome to UK Column News. And you're going to take us through BBC fake news before getting into some of the horrors that, of course, that the BBC just doesn't or will not report.
Yes, I mean, the BBC is infamous for, particularly, as you've mentioned many times before, it's BBC Media Action, basically an infiltration tool into countries like Syria, that after the scouting done by BBC Media Action would then be basically targeted for regime change and destabilisation. We've covered this a number of times. But this is actually on the BBC World News website. The report was generated by BBC Persia, which is known by most Iranians to be, let's say, the flagship of the propaganda that is being waged against Iran. And of course, one of the mainstays of that propaganda is the head covering rule. They always call it a hijab. You don't have to wear a hijab in Iran. I spent 2 weeks there about 2 years ago in Tehran and in a number of other cities, and the headscarf rule is simply that, just cover your head. You don't have to wear a veil, you don't have to wear even a full hijab of any description. And I have to say that I didn't see any morality police. And the majority of women in Tehran, in particular, in many of, let's say, the wealthier areas, but also in the markets and the souks, were not wearing any kind of head covering. But the BBC has put out this quite incredible headline for me: Iranian woman paralyzed after being shot over hijab. Over hijab, I should have underlined this. And then let's have a look at the actual report. So this was reported by Bahram Gobadi, who's actually based in the UK when you look at his X account, formerly with Reuters, now with BBC Persian. So a mother of two has been left paraplegic, according to the BBC, after being shot by Iranian police over an alleged violation of the country's strict hijab rules. A source with knowledge of the case has told the BBC. How many times have we seen BBC and legacy media reports using these anonymous sources to basically back up the mainstay propaganda against a target nation? And of course, this is coming in at a time that Iran is, if you like, center stage with the potential of escalation between Israel and Iran after the assassination of the Hamas chief negotiator, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran 2 weeks ago. So let's have a look at what the actual police report said. Unfortunately, I've only got it in Persian, but basically a number of activists went immediately onto X to say that that's literally not true. She was inside a fully tinted glass windows car and ignored an anti-theft halt. So the police believed the car was stolen and then tried to escape. When you actually read the police report itself, they talk about the fact that she ran through red lights, she ran through police stops, and bear in mind, they couldn't see who was actually in the car. So when they got to her, she was injured. In the police report itself, it doesn't actually mention any shooting. So potentially she was injured simply through damage to the car or crashing the car. It has literally nothing to do with her hijab. That's the very important point here. And, even if there is some question over this, the BBC is not reflecting that question. The headline is very unambiguous. It deliberately gravitates towards this having something to do with the head covering, which actually it really doesn't, according to information that I've received. And there's no verification, there's no substantiation. So, this is the rigorous journalism, as I've been told multiple times by the BBC when they question my narratives from inside Syria, that the BBC is constantly boasting of. I'll leave people to make up their own minds whether they consider the BBC to be fit for purpose or not.
I'll just come back to you, Vanessa. Of course, I remember very well a couple of years ago, the BBC pumping articles out about the wearing of hijabs. in Iran, and we tackled the BBC at the time and said that basically their reports were inflammatory and inaccurate. And of course, eventually the BBC just simply refused to answer. But to us, it was very clear that the agenda of the BBC was to use the hijab as a wedge to start unrest in Iranian society. And of course, that mirrors exactly BBC media action working inside Syria to engage those who were challenging the government. So it's terrible times when you have a multi-billion-pound media organisation funded by the taxpayer that is then going to effectively tell lies to the people paying for it.